home is not near. Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. We have so much this evening, but I want to remind everyone of a couple things because some things have launched. Some really cool things, but some things have definitely launched. I want to say, first of all, thank you so much to all my Cameron Journal Plus subscribers. If you want to join Cameron Journal Plus, you really, really should. Simply because I didn't need that right this second, but here it is. Because you get the newsletter delivered to your inbox ad-free, and you get to access to the Discord and get to hang out with me and ask questions and all this type of thing. So it's a lot of fun. Also, not for this first one, but here soon, Cameron Journal Plus members will be getting into my new private events free. So, since the graphic's already here, I was trying to prep it, but it just popped right on the screen. I am launching Cameron Journal Salons. These are not public streams. If you're watching right now, this won't be here. These are private and evening with streams that we're going to be having some people on to talk about. For this one, I've got David Beckham-Myers coming. I've got Terry Whalen, who's a self-publishing expert. Michelle Stiles has recently been on the show. Oh, and Barry Marr is coming as well. So we're going to have a panel of people. We're going to have a lovely evening of conversation. We're going to kind of start out with some discussion among the panel, and then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So if you want to talk about outrage journalism and how outrage became the business of modern media, then this is an absolute must-attend event. So it's on May 7th. You can go to salons.cameronjournal.com to check that out. That website should be up and functioning. I've been told it was. But if not, you should connect with me on social media at Cameron Cowan, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, at Cameron Journal on TikTok, all this type of thing. And you should sign up for the Cameron Journal newsletter because you get this stuff delivered directly to your inbox. No more having to catch it on the show. No. You can have it delivered directly into your inbox. There's two ways to sign up for the newsletter. You can go to cameronjournal.substack.com and subscribe there, including subscribe to Cameron Journal Plus if you do the basic paid tier, or you can go to cameronjournal.com/newsletter and you can sign up for the newsletter. And if you want to sign up for Cameron Journal Plus, you can go to cameronjournal.com/subscribe, or if you go over to the newsletter, there's a button to take you over to subscribe to Cameron Journal Plus. So, it's all pretty simple and straightforward. So, but if you're already on Substack and you don't want to start another account, I get you. I got you. cameronjournal.substack.com. You can subscribe for $8 a month, and that also counts as Cameron Journal Plus membership. So, like I said, this first event for Cameron Journal Salons is going to be free. You can just sign up, all this type of thing. There are going to be 3 more between now and July, and the other 3 will be paid. So, sign up to the newsletter. You'll get all the marketing, get all the details. There'll be more information as we come along. But I want to start talking about it because it's coming right up on May 7th. I'm so busy right now trying to get this up and going and off the ground, and there's marketing to do and lots of stuff happening. So I wanted to start talking about it now because I'm not going to have too many opportunities to talk about it before the event. Especially because I might take my birthday's on Sunday. I might take next Monday off. We'll see how I feel. But yeah, Cameron Journal Salons are here. So if you enjoy this journalism, enjoy the show, all this type of thing, then you're going to really enjoy, Cameron Journal Salons. So with all that being said, let's dive into the headlines. Let's change this to this. For some reason, I don't understand. Changing to the video scene causes my laptop to have a minor freak out. And this is the wrong graphic for the wrong show, but that's okay because it's easily changed to the right show. The right coloring for the right show. And we're going to talk a little bit about Zohran Mamdani. It's not going to be another, my weird take on a take. This is funny. And I wanted to start on a light note because the rest of what I have to say is not going to be very light. But this was genuinely entertaining. Zohran is giving a press conference and he uses a Mario Kart comparison. And I love the caption at the top. Welcome, dear friends, to Millennial Political Supremacy. This will be our politics for the next 50 years. Sorry, Zoomers. Here we go.
In New York City as an incubator for change and as a powerful tool to expand access to city programs. I like to think of it this way. Government is driving the race car, and philanthropy is there to give it that turbo boost to cross the finish line. Or if you are a Mario Kart fan, government is Yoshi and philanthropy is the golden mushroom, that edge we need to beat Bowser on the Rainbow Road. To belabor this metaphor even further, Bowser is corporate greed in this scenario. In all seriousness, when I think of the Mayor's Fund, I think of New Yorkers from every industry, every borough, coming together. I think of the vision that has defined some of our city's most ambitious initiatives. Initiatives like the Summer Youth Employment Program, also known as SYEP, the largest and longest running summer jobs program in the country. This is a prime...
You get his point. When he's going into the new programs that he's starting in the way to make the city cheaper and more livable. I just love the caption. Sorry. So welcome, dear friends, to Millennial Political Supremacy. This will be our politics for the next 50 years. It is so true. Like, this is going to be, this is going to definitely be the way politicians talk for the foreseeable. And because there's so many millennials, it's going to take a while to get rid of us. We're only in our 30s. This is us now, comparing corporate greed to Bowser and philanthropy and government to Mario Kart and Yoshi and the Golden Mushroom. Yeah, so, like I said, this was fun. Obviously, Mamdani's doing a lot of new programs. There's a lot of people that think he's ruining New York, ruining the city. He's going to destroy everything. I don't necessarily think that's the case. There was a lot of hubbub. They're now taxing second homes valued over $5 million. And there's been a little bit of, outcry about that sort of thing. I think the suspicions around Mamdani come from the old narrative of it's the tax and spend left, it's the tax and spend socialists at it again, sort of thing, creating all these programs that are dependent or full of corruption and fraud like Minnesota. And all that narrative does is send one message. Government can't be trusted. Government can't do anything. Therefore, government capacity must be kept small so government doesn't do anything. And one of the things I think people forget about this country is people don't really necessarily want government to do a lot of things. Our politics reflect this all the time. It's why you end up with split government, where you end up with someone in the White House, different party in the legislature. It's to cause a certain amount of gridlock. And there's a certain amount of gridlock baked into the system that's just there to keep things from not moving forward. I think what's interesting now is one that's starting to change. People are expecting, even MAGA people are starting to be kind of like, well, what are my tax dollars going to? All this, like, that is starting to not just be a standard complaint people have, but is really starting to come from a place of, why don't my dollars do anything for me? I would give you all this money for what? It always seems to go to other people. How you solve that is by creating programs like what Mamdani is proposing, with universal childcare and city-owned grocery stores and all this type of thing. That's the government actually doing things for people. And in the recent past, that has been highly effective. But in order to pay for that, you have to have, relatively high taxes. I think people would feel less bad about taxes if they got more bang for their buck. And the reality is, when compared to Europe, we actually pay more taxes than they do and we get less services. So anyway, enough of that. I want to immediately bounce over to some breaking news. We've got two stories on that front. One is Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer, who's the Labor Secretary, stepped down on Monday as multiple scandals and investigations closed in on her. It says, quote, Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer will be leaving the administration to take a position in the private sector. Stephen Chung, a White House spokesman, posted on X. He said that Keith Sonderling, the Deputy Secretary of Labor, would serve as acting secretary. Mr. Chung said Ms. Chavez DeRemer had done a phenomenal job in her role by protecting American workers, enacting fair labor practices, and helping Americans gain additional skills to improve their lives. But pressure on her mounted in recent weeks as investigators and congressional leaders honed in on questions about her conduct in office and that of her aides and family members. The Labor Department's Inspector General's office is nearing the end of a months-long investigation into a whistleblower's allegations of professional misconduct by Ms. Chavez DeRemer and her closest aides, including claims that she was having an affair with a member of her security team and that she used department resources for personal trips. Ms. Chavez DeRemer was expected to be interviewed in the matter in the coming days. Investigators spoke with several dozen witnesses and uncovered evidence that Ms. Chavez DeRemer and her staff abused federal spending limits on personal trips, several people familiar with the investigation said, including on fancy hotels, SUV rentals, and meals. 4 people have already left or been forced out of their jobs in connection with the investigation. Investigators had also reviewed personal text messages sent to young female staff members by Ms. Chavez DeRemer, her former deputy chief of staff, her husband, and her father. The messages reported last week by the New York Times suggested that the secretary was drinking during the workday and raised questions about professionalism with her staff. The likelihood of embarrassing details coming out through the Inspector General inquiry was compounded by a parallel inquiry on Capitol Hill. Senator Charles E. Grassley, oh God, not Chuck Grassley, of Iowa and Republican chair of the Judiciary Committee, demanded internal records and statements from the department in connection with the allegations. Ms. Chavez DeRemer's husband has been barred from the department's headquarters after female staff members accused him of making unwanted sexual advances, including filing a police report. Although police and prosecutors have said they would not bring criminal charges against him, the situation has continued to reverberate in the Secretary's office. In recent weeks, 3 claims of a hostile work environment were filed against Ms. Chavez DeRemer with the Department's Civil Rights Office. Mr. Sonderling, a labor lawyer with a decade of government experience, has been effectively leading the Department of Labor during Ms. Chavez DeRemer's tenure, multiple employees told the Times. Ms. Chavez DeRemer, 58, a one-term former Republican congresswoman from Oregon, was nominated to the secretary position with backing from the Teamsters Union, whose president, Sean O'Brien, has supported Mr. Trump's 2024 run. But her leadership of the department left many employees frustrated and demoralized, including career staff with political appointees. Dozens described in interviews with the Times a toxic workplace characterized by an absentee secretary and hostile aides. So, well, she lasted a year and a couple months. That's actually quite lengthy for the Trump administration. But speaking of misconduct and investigation, let's talk about Kash Patel suing the Atlantic over their article about excessive drinking, which we covered in the newsletter on Saturday. That's why you need to subscribe to the newsletter. I send out all sorts of juicy stuff, including this week's interviews from the Cameron Journal, The Living Joke, articles from the Cameron Journal, and juicy stories like this. CameronJournal.substack.com. Anyway. So that article came out on Friday, and it went around on Saturday. And Monday, Kash Patel filed a lawsuit. The FBI director, Kash Patel, sued The Atlantic on Monday, accusing it of defamation over an article that claimed excessive drinking and unexplained absences were putting his job in jeopardy. Now, I'm not quite sure how that puts his job in jeopardy, but sure, buddy. We'll go along with that. It says here, the article under the headline, "The FBI Director is MIA," was published on Friday and detailed Mr. Patel's behavior and his role leading to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, citing more than 24 anonymous sources. The author, Sarah Fitzpatrick, wrote that Mr. Patel's conduct had, quote, often alarmed officials at the FBI and the Department of Justice. The article said he, quote, has also earned a reputation for acting impulsively during high-stakes investigations. There was also a thing in there where they said that they had breaching equipment because he would, lock himself in rooms and they couldn't get him out. It says here that Mr. Patel denied the claims in the statement to The Atlantic, which the article included. The White House also denied the claims, with Carolyn Leavitt, its press secretary, telling The Atlantic that, quote, Director Patel remains a critical player on the administration's law and order team. Mr. Patel immediately began threatening a lawsuit which was filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia against both The Atlantic and Ms. Fitzpatrick. The suit seeks $250 million in damages. A spokeswoman for The Atlantic said on Monday that the publication stood by its reporting, quote, "We will vigorously defend The Atlantic and our journalists against this meritless lawsuit," she said in a statement. In his complaint, Mr. Patel accused the defendants of publishing an article replete with false and obviously fabricated allegations designed to destroy Director Patel's reputation and drive him from office. He pushed back on the allegations that he drinks to the point of obvious intoxication at places like the members-only clubs, Ned's in Washington and Poodle Room in Las Vegas. Director Patel does not drink to excess at these establishments or anywhere else, and this has not and has never been a source of concern across the government, the complaint said. Mr. Patel also said in the suit that The Atlantic had published the article, quote, despite being expressly warned hours before publication that the essential allegations were categorically false. He said in his suit that the FBI had been given less than 2 hours to comment on a list of 19 claims provided by The Atlantic, and that his legal counsel had sent the publication a letter refuting the claims, asking for more time to respond and demanding that the article not be published. Mr. Patel, as a public figure, must meet a higher standard than an ordinary citizen to prove his case. He must show not only that there were falsehoods in the article, but also, quote-unquote, actual malice, a legal standard that means the defendants published defamatory material either while knowing it was false or with reckless disregard to its truth. The lawsuit is the latest in a series of the Trump administration against media outlets over unfavorable reporting. Last week, a federal judge dismissed President Trump's complaint against the Wall Street Journal over a birthday message to the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, though Mr. Trump may refile that lawsuit. The president has also filed lawsuits in recent months against the New York Times, the BBC, CNN, and the Des Moines Register. I did a thread on Twitter about the Wall Street Journal article and talked about how it could be refiled and what he was going to do, and that the Wall Street Journal victory was a bit Pyrrhic. If you want to read that, check socials, it's on there. Yeah, this is the typical Trump administration. Something goes wrong, something is said, something is written, and their first idea is just to simply sue. Get in court, ask for an absurd amount of money. It usually goes nowhere because the moral of the story is Trump and all the people like him around him do not like media investigations into themselves. It's really that simple. They are not interested in dealing with the press, dealing with all of this. They, the free speech and freedom of the press extends only to, social media platforms who've donated. It doesn't certainly extend to them. And I will say, this is not just a Republican thing. Many Democrat administrations are just as bad about this stuff. What makes the Trump administration different is they tend to sue more often than Democrats have in the past. There's always a cantankerous relationship between the government, in terms of the people working for the government, and the media. The media's job is to keep an eye on them, keep them accountable, write about them, and their job is to do their jobs and to not shy away from the scrutiny that a free press demands, that a democracy demands. And if they're not acting in the best interests of the people or in a good capacity, that's supposed to come out in the media. Now, obviously, as we all know, the media is not exactly Johnny on it when it comes to keeping government accountable or asking deep, insightful questions about things that are going on. They tend to go for the low-hanging fruit. And in Kash Patel's defense, this is rather low-hanging fruit. But I'm not thrilled about the raft of lawsuits. That's, in my mind, not necessarily fair play. Someone writes something you don't like, you counter it with PR, you counter it with narrative, you don't file a lawsuit. And bearing in mind, this came out on Friday and he already had a lawsuit ready to go. He knows what he's doing. So, moving right along, interesting midterms update on the Senate for Democrats. Let me change a graphic. Midterm update. Democrats? Senate? Maybe. So, was an odd environment, but Nate Cohn, formerly of 538, says why a Democratic Senate once unthinkable is a real possibility. Helped by a favorable national environment and strong candidate recruitment, Democrats are tied or ahead in 4 Republican-held seats, polls show. And so here we have Democrats could win the Senate by flipping seats in 4 states. So held by Democrats can win by retaining all 13 of their seats up for election, including Massachusetts, Delaware, Oregon, Rhode Island, Colorado, Illinois, New Mexico, New Jersey, Virginia, and Minnesota, and New Hampshire. And then flipping 4, in recent polls, Democrats appear tied or even ahead in Maine, North Carolina, Ohio, and Alaska. I know Mary Patola is doing big work up in Alaska. If this happens, and I doubt it will, that will be quite a rebuke to the president's agenda. It says here, at the start of the 2026 election cycle, the Senate looked far out of reach for Democrats. The House always seemed competitive, but retaking the Senate would require flipping at least 4 Republican-held seats, including at least 2 seats in states that President Trump won by double digits in 2024. In today's polarized era, Democrats would need everything to break their way. So far, everything is breaking the Democrats' way. With Mr. Trump's approval rating falling and inflation rising, along with the uncertainty of a war in the Middle East, it's not hard to imagine a Democrat tsunami in November. A blue wave is not guaranteed, of course, and Democrats would not be assured to flip two reliably Republican states even if it were, but a feasible path for the party to win the Senate is coming into focus. I think there's opportunity in Maine. There might be something in North Carolina. Kamala Harris was there last week. Ohio, I think, is hard. Alaska's weird, and Mary Patel is popular, and they don't like the current person there. I think you could do something in Alaska, but Ohio, I think, is the missing piece there. Anyway, in recent polls, Democrats appear tied or ahead in 4 Republican-controlled seats, the number they would need to take the Senate. These include Maine and North Carolina, where the likely Democratic nominees hold clear leads, as well as Ohio and Alaska, where Democrats have recruited strong candidates in states Mr. Trump won by double digits. There are also signs the Republicans could be in danger in 2 more states where Mr. Trump won by double digits, Iowa and Texas. Over the last few weeks, the betting markets have shifted to make the Senate a toss-up, even though some analysts haven't gone quite so far. Whether the Senate is a toss-up or not, it's clearly competitive, and that's something that might have been hard to imagine a year ago. In the Trump era, Democratic Senate candidates haven't had much success at winning in red states. They failed to flip vigorously contested seats in Texas, Tennessee, and Montana in 2018 and 2020. And most Democratic red state incumbents, including those in Florida, Indiana, North Dakota, and Missouri, lost re-election. Today, every Democrat in the Senate represents a state that voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Looking even further back, no party has managed to flip 2 states that lean so much towards the other party since 2008. Only one such seat, Illinois in 2010, was flipped in a regularly scheduled election. 2 more flipped in memorable special elections, Massachusetts 2010, Liz Warren, Alabama 2017, John Ossoff, and Ralph Warnock. Most of these victories took extraordinary circumstances like a criminal conviction, a child molestation allegation, or a bank seizure. This time, Democrats aren't benefiting from anything as unusual as a criminal conviction. Instead, they're counting on a favorable national political environment, strong candidates, and the possibility that several of these states may not be quite as Republican-leaning as they seem. That's certainly true for North Carolina. I don't know how true that is for Ohio and Alaska. So that's that was an interesting thing, especially given last week we talked about Trump's not great poll numbers, where he's in the high 30s nationally, and he's underwater on every major issue. That environment is what is making this this possible. Is there anything good in the comment section? Yeah. Oh, that is a good point. The Democrats may win back the Senate and the House in the midterms, mostly due to a big anti-Trump vote. But the question is, will they be able to govern effectively if they do? Their gerontology problem is still a big issue. Unless they can stop eating their own, they will fail. Abandoning Swalwell without the due process was a serious mistake. Sounds like the House Ethics Committee is a joke with no teeth to do its job. Funny. Sometimes one of the great things with the New York Times comment section is they definitely do reader picks. And so comments that are particularly good get pressed to the top, and I've always enjoyed that. So, let's get into some AI news. I have a couple stories on AI. One has to do with the Palantir manifesto, and why AI is like a boy thing and not a girl thing. And women don't like AI. So we'll start with the Palantir story, because I have another thing about Palantir. Palantir being threatened by leftist activism from the Manhattan Institute, their newsletter, the City Journal. But it says here, surveillance and analytics company Palantir recently posted what it called a brief 22-point summary of CEO Alex Karp's book, The Technological Republic. Written by Karp and Palantir's head of corporate affairs, Nicholas Zimiska, The Technological Republic was published last year and described by its authors as, quote, the beginnings of the articulation of the theory behind Palantir's work. One critic said it was not a book at all, but a piece of corporate sales material. The company's ideological bent has come under more scrutiny since then, as the tech industry figures have debated Palantir's work with immigration and customs enforcement, and as the company has positioned itself as an organization working for the defense of the West. In fact, congressional Democrats recently sent a letter to ICE and the Department of Homeland Security demanding more information about how tools built by Palantir and, quote, a range of surveillance companies, unquote, are being used in the Trump administration's aggressive deportation strategy. Palantir's post doesn't reference much of the context directly, simply saying that it's providing the summary because we get asked a lot. Then it suggests that Silicon Valley owes a moral debt to the country that made its rise possible, and declares that, quote, free email is not enough. Quote, the decadence of a culture or civilization is indeed its ruling class. And its ruling class will be forgiven only if that culture is capable of delivering economic growth and security for the public. The post is wide-ranging, at one point criticizing a culture that, quote, almost snickers at Musk's interest in grand narrative, unquote, and at another point touching on recent debates about the use of artificial intelligence by the military. Quote, the question is not whether AI weapons will be built, it is who will build them and for what purpose, Palantir says. Our adversaries will not pause to indulge in theatrical debates about the merits of developing technologies with critical military and national security applications. They will proceed. Similarly, the company suggests that, quote, the atomic age is ending, unquote, while a new era of deterrence built on AI is set to begin. I would invite them to understand every nuclear nonproliferation treaty except one has gone away. And bombs still exist. So, yeah, I don't know that your data centers are going to be nearly as powerful as being able to blow a city off the map and kill millions of people with the push of a button. But go off. Anyway, the Post also takes a moment to denounce, quote, the post-war neutering of Germany and Japan, unquote, adding that, quote, the defanging of Germany was an overcorrection for which Europe is now paying a heavy price, unquote, and that, quote, a similar and highly theatrical commitment to Japanese pacifism, unquote, could, quote, threaten to shift the balance of power in Asia, unquote. The Post ends by criticizing, quote, the shadows set temptation of a vacant and hollow pluralism, unquote. In Palantir's argument, a blind devotion to pluralism and inclusivity, quote, glosses over the fact that certain cultures and indeed subcultures have produced wonders. Others have proven middling and worse, regressive and harmful, unquote. After Palantir posted this on Saturday, Elliot Higgins, the CEO of the investigative website Bellingcat, dryly remarked that it was, quote, extremely normal and fine for a company to put this in a public statement, unquote. Higgins also argued that there's more to the post than a simple, quote, defense of the West, unquote. In his view, it's an attack on what he said are key pillars of democracy that need rebuilding, including verification, deliberation, and accountability. Quote, it's also worth being clear about who's doing the arguing, Higgins wrote. Palantir sells operational software to defense, intelligence, immigration, police agencies. These 22 points aren't philosophy floating in space. They're the public ideology of a company whose revenue depends on the politics it's advocating. I read this in a post and found this reporting, and I knew I wanted to talk about it. Especially the cultural argument is straight off the most racist parts of Twitter. That, you know, hey, we got to defend the West because our culture is great and other cultures are not. And that really just means African people and African descended people. Even though the Greeks got a lot of their knowledge from Africa. I don't mean to go hotep on you, but yeah. So that was an interesting manifesto, and I wanted to read and get into that. But before we go on to the women don't like AI thing, I do want to stop by this article from City Journal. This is Manhattan Institute, and they have written an article by Stu Smith that says the leftist activism against Palantir could threaten national security. Mostly because Palantir kind of got ran out of Denver and moved to Florida recently. Says here, a multi-city campaign led by far-left activists is targeting the American technology firm Palantir, portraying it as central to U.S. immigration enforcement, military operations, and Israel's war in Gaza. Activists in Denver, Minneapolis, and South Florida see the company as a vulnerable target. As with these activists' past efforts against Lockheed Martin, the campaign against Palantir raises national security concerns, especially if sustained pressure begins to disrupt the operations of a key provider of defense, counterterrorism, and law enforcement tools and services for the government. The activists secured an early win against Palantir in Denver, where their efforts forced the company to relocate its executive offices to the Miami area. I think they were just protesting outside. But we continue. Now they're mobilizing allies in Florida to extend the campaign, while intensifying activity in the communities where Palantir operates or maintains ties. During a recent webinar, activists from Anti-War Action Network outlined the Denver campaign and described how similar strategies might succeed elsewhere. They emphasized its core tactics: coalition building, sustained disruption, and economic pressure. Anti-war, anti-Israel, and anti-deportation activists, they argued, must work together to build political leverage against the company. Brandon Gerka, Quintanilla, and Hatem Terrelabar, I butchered those names, I'm so sorry, represented the Denver Coalition. Gerke Quintanilla is a co-founder of the immigrant rights group Aurora Unidos CSO and serves as co-chair of the Legalization for All Network, a key national umbrella organization in the anti-ICE mobilization. He argued that Palantir has streamlined ICE's operations to such an extent that what previously would have taken days, now in certain cases it can take hours. Trellbar, representing Denver Anti-War Action, DAWA, explained that in early 2025, DAWA focused on targeting Lockheed Martin, but members soon realized the factors that made Lockheed Martin hard to operate against: its location outside the city, its presence on federal land, and the fact that its Denver area presence was just one of many Lockheed locations did not exist with Palantir. Palantir cited its global headquarters in a rented office space in a dense, highly populated area of Denver, offering what Terrellbar described as favorable local conditions. The campaign kicked off in April 2025 and went on to include at least 28 rallies, marches, pickets, or car rallies, and internal disruptions over 44 weeks. Terrellbar bragged that not a week went by without some action being taken against Palantir. He noted that DAWA acted during business hours, but in unpredictable times to maximize disruptions, and it coordinated with other organizers to extend efforts beyond the company itself, targeting its landlord and attempting to put pressure on Palantir's neighbors, hoping they would complain to the landlords and add to that pressure. In the same webinar, Mae Vakin, representing the Minnesota Anti-War Committee, described how activists in her state are targeting the Minnesota State Board of Investment to demand divestment from Palantir. She explained that Palantir has been a particularly effective organizing focus as public anger has grown over immigration enforcement activity in Minnesota. Aiken's organization has been involved in seemingly successful divestment campaigns before, such as the sit-in targeting of the State Board of Investment, in which Aiken and several others were arrested. She noted that a public records request revealed the State Board of Investment had quietly divested $13.3 million worth of holdings in Israeli bonds, though the board has denied these moves were a divestment. A similar victory of complete divestment from Palantir would open a door that can't be closed and increase the size of the crowd trying to knock the whole thing down. The final presenter, Hannah Colantes of South Florida Anti-War Committee, acknowledged that her group's campaign against Palantir is in its early stages, but their organization has already organized an unwelcome party at Aventura Mall, site of the company's new headquarters, alongside coalition partners Mahente and Jewish Vote for Peace. Colantes claimed that protesters weren't allowed inside the mall due to law enforcement preventing them from being as close and as disruptive as he would want to, but she described the action as very visible. Clearly the word is spreading. Palantir is the new bête noire of far-left activists. Jewish Voice for Peace recently mobilized in the lobby of Palantir's New York City office alongside the Sunrise Movement and Jews for Racial and Economic Justice as part of the latter's annual Seder in the Streets direct action. The militant AIDS activist group ACT UP New York even staged a die-in outside Palantir's office in the city, arguing that funding the war with Iran diverts resources away from HIV programs. So who exactly is leading the charge against Palantir? While the Anti-War Action Network presents itself as a broad, generic coalition, it operates as an umbrella organization that overlaps significantly with Freedom Road's socialist organization ecosystem. Many of its affiliated groups, often branded as local anti-war committees, have been linked to more confrontational forms of activism. Organizers connected to these networks include Rick Toledo, who was involved in the occupation of Cal Poly Humboldt and faced charges of false imprisonment, assault, and battery against the associate director of the Student Activities Center. Another figure, Connor Cawley, allegedly disrupted a Jacksonville City Council meeting and was charged with carrying a concealed weapon. In 2010, the FBI investigated many individuals linked to the Freedom Road Socialist Organization for their work with the Anti-War Committee, citing alleged material support for terrorism, though those charges were ultimately dropped or never filed. Some of these individuals have since become movement elders in these circles and even co-hosted a webinar last year with the Anti-War Action Network on how they organize in response to the charges. And then it goes into some strategy. Here's the good bit, here at the end. The campaign against Palantir Technologies is not a spontaneous surge of grassroots activism, but part of a long-term strategy of the far left. Coalitions like the Anti-War Action Network and FRSO have repeatedly rebranded, regrouped, and shifted efforts to new targets with striking effectiveness. Palantir is just the latest, chosen for its perceived vulnerabilities. These activist offensives can and will have serious national security consequences. America's military and law enforcement apparatus depend on Palantir's technology to be more effective and more humane. The activists seem intent on crippling these capabilities. For President Trump's revamped Justice Department, the question is whether to continue to treat these actions as routine protests or as part of a pattern that demands closer scrutiny and a coordinated response. And there we have it, way down at the bottom, way down, way down here at the end, way down here. We have the whole, like, it's going to, remember the article title is activists campaign against Palantir could threaten national security. This has nothing to do with national security. It's mentioned at the end. It's like, but the government uses these services. It could be, make the government less effective. Never a defense of Palantir. Never a defense of what they're doing. Never a defense of the questions around civil rights or a right to privacy, which these used to be things that the right cared about. No. All of it is just those darn far leftists are preventing us from doing what we need to do and asking those pesky questions and organizing against us. And, maybe since, all this is really important, even though we don't know what it is, what it does, or if we truly defend it or might be violating rights, never us mind about that. The pesky far left has to be crushed as part of a pattern that demands closer scrutiny and a coordinated response. That's very soft Manhattan Institute language for get rid of the far left. Imprison them, arrest them, all this type of thing. That's what that is. And I say all of this to say, if you're watching this and you're unclear about what's happening here, what's being done, all this type of thing, this is the Manhattan Institute. They're as conservative as they come. This is what's being written, and I guarantee you the people in the administration are thinking about this. And Palantir is going to do everything they can to, reduce the amount of public involvement and public attention on them. And if someone is already advocating for a government response to these groups and organizations, they're being effective. Now, we can have another conversation on whether I agree with them or not. I happen to think Palantir enables the technology that allows the government to violate civil rights and constitutional privileges, and I don't think that's a good thing. When it comes to their work with national security, I have less of a problem with that. But oftentimes, this technology is used to go around human checking and involvement, and to go around a preservation of rights. And we've already lived through that with the global war on terrorism, where we were imprisoning American citizens when we shouldn't have been doing that. We killed them when we shouldn't have been doing that. Palantir enables all this to happen at lightning speed. And we also know their technology about gathering immigrants isn't quite accurate because we've gathered a lot of American citizens and all that. So I understand people's response. I'm not necessarily I don't need to have a personal opinion about Palantir. I have an opinion about what they do and how the technology manifests in society, and I don't think it's a good thing. And it's very understandable that groups would be organizing against them, especially given the present immigration debate and how they have enabled the Trump administration on that. So yeah, but the argument never is, oh, we need to rein in Palantir, we need to pass new legislation, we need to make sure they're not violating the law. It's like, no, just get rid of the people shouting about it. And that's not a good thing. So that's Palantir. I want to get into this one. We're not going to read this whole thing because it's way too much. But I saw this from Collective Evolution. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze there for a second. I saw this from Collective Evolution, and it's interesting because apparently women are not adopting AI like men are. And the reasons why are quite interesting. And so down here at the end of the articles where things are important, what the skepticism actually reflects, it says, among adolescents, the same pattern is already visible. In one recent survey, 71% of teenage girls expressed concerns about AI reinforcing gender bias, and 70% linked AI recommendation algorithms to poor mental health outcomes. Most boys, by contrast, believed AI would help create more jobs and were far less concerned about its broader societal impact, with their interest diverging towards AI development and robotics, while girls were drawn towards ethics and policy questions. This divergence is not a gap in understanding, but a difference in what each group has been given reason to pay attention to. And the girls asking questions about ethics and policy are asking the questions that the people building these systems have consistently failed to ask themselves, which is why the technology has arrived in the world and the condition has arrived in. Women working in AI have been among the first to raise serious concerns about where the technology is headed. It was two black women, Judy Buluini and Timit Gebru, who first sounded the alarm about racial and gender bias in AI facial analysis software, doing so at significant professional cost and against the resistance of institutions that had more invested in the technology's reputation than in the accuracy of the critique. The framing of women's relationship to AI as a problem of underrepresentation or insufficient adoption misses what the evidence is actually showing, which is that women are not failing to keep up with the technology that's working as intended, but are responding rationally to a technology that has demonstrated repeatedly and across multiple domains that it was not built with their safety, dignity, or interests as a meaningful design consideration. One of the things they mention above in the article, that a lot of women's first experience with AI is deep fakes and nudes being passed around, and how damaging that can be, particularly in high school. And so there's a lot of suspicion around AI of how's it going to be used, who's going to use it, are there any safeguards, all this type of thing, for obvious reasons that already exist. But anyway, the article finishes in a really great way. It says here, the solution being proposed most frequently is to encourage women to use AI more, to close the gap through training and exposure and cultural messaging about the opportunities being missed. And that solution is worth examining carefully because it places the burden of adjustment entirely on the people who have had the most legitimate reasons for their current position, while asking nothing of the institutions and incentive structures that produce the technology in its current form. The deeper question this raises is one I've been exploring in different contexts for a long time, which is what it means to build systems without genuinely accounting for the full range of people those systems will affect, and what happens when the incentive structures driving development reward speed and market capture over safety, ethics, and the kind of long-term thinking that would require taking seriously the concerns of the people raising them. Women's skepticism about AI is a reasonable response to documented evidence about what the technology does, who it was built for, and what the people building it have consistently prioritized when forced to choose between profit and the well-being of the people their tools affect. As we always say at CE, that's collective evolution, technology is generally neutral, but our culture and system incentive structures that shape what becomes of that tech. The way AI is being shaped right now matches the general destruction habit of our culture. So the question worth asking is not how to get women to worry less about AI, but the rest of the world isn't worrying more. And I thought that was interesting because at the top, it's an interesting implication to be kind of like, there's a reason women aren't adopting AI like men are, and I'm kind of like, is AI a guy thing? But as I'm reading, the concerns were um definitely different than I thought they would be, and a lot of it has to do with deep fakes, non-consensual sexually explicit images, getting this spread around online, and how women have already experienced or know someone who has already experienced that, even in high school and all this sort of thing. And then when you add in the issues of facial recognition, the technology, what technology is neutral, but what it does is it takes whatever is in society and it amplifies it. It makes it louder. It makes it more pronounced. And so when it comes to women or other minority groups, when you're already marginalized in society, technology is going to amplify that. This is why technology sometimes is a mirror, and a very uncomfortable one, because it amplifies things you would rather not talk about. So after I was kind of like, oh, is this another like women aren't doing enough tech stuff, and I actually read it and be like, oh, this makes sense why women are hesitating about AI. But one of the top comments that I thought was very interesting, and it's not here, it's not displaying, but someone mentioned that women are very deeply intuitive, and that also is a factor. But I love this one that is here, and it says, because when they move fast and break things, we're the ones that clean up and put them back together, about men. And this other one, probably because, at least broadly speaking, women understand the concept of invisible labor and men don't. Um, it's yeah, it's it's yeah, it was a very interesting concept, and why, it isn't just a whole thing like, oh, women are just not adopting it. They are. It's just that they're cautious, and rightly so, given everything that has happened. So, let's dive into Iran. We have some Iran news. Um, so there's still a lot of back and forth about whether the Strait of Hormuz is open or closed, or open closed, or whatever it is or isn't. But last week there was a new deal on the table that may not be on the table now, because apparently negotiations have already broken down, and Iran doesn't know that it wants to come back to the negotiating table, because the President Trump keeps saying stuff in public and not in private, and different in private, and all this sort of thing. But this new deal considers 20 billion cash for uranium deal, that we will buy their uranium for them, and that will end their nuclear program and their civilian development of nuclear materials. And I thought this post was quite interesting, because we're now basically back to where we started with the Iran nuclear deal. It says, a reasonable deal is better than a return to war, and I'll support it. But let's remember that this is a colossal failure for Trump and U.S. interests. And this is from Goldenberg here. And it says here that we could have had this deal or something similar before the war without the death and destruction across the Middle East, massive damage to U.S. allies and partners in global relationships, huge use of military resources that will take years to rebuild, and significant damage to the global economy. If Trump hadn't left the JCPOA, that's the Iran nuclear deal, we'd probably be in the midst of negotiations on extensions of key components and follow-on deals. At this point, but from a much stronger position. Iran wouldn't have 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, and we'd have the most comprehensive inspections regime ever developed to catch any cheating. Instead, this 3-page memorandum of understanding will probably involve nothing even close on what is arguably the single most important element of any nuclear deal: inspections and verification. Yeah, probably. Or Iran could just sell us the uranium and then promptly get back to work making everything. So that is, yeah. So this came from Barack David at Axios. It says here that and someone replied and talked about some of the bigger picture issues, including reporting from Iran, all this sort of thing. Yeah, it's it's an interesting. No one's really quite sure what exactly is going on right now in terms of the war, other than we're still in the 2-week ceasefire. The U.S. Navy's turning back ships from the American blockade. And Iran is still charging tolls to get oil out, but with the American blockade, nothing's really getting out. And so it keeps going. It keeps continuing. However, with the blockade, we're still 20% of the world's oil supply short. And I saw this last week that apparently at 11:09 a.m. Eastern, oil in Singapore and Sri Lanka surged over $200 a barrel. These are not future prices; these were as delivered prices, which was very important. 210 and 286 is crazy. And so obviously the post is a bit florid. Oil goes ballistic, but yeah, this is the actual delivered price right now for barrels of oil, and Lord knows that's unsustainable. It's Singapore can afford that. I doubt Sri Lanka can for very long. So it's not going to be too long, I will say, before, and we're already seeing an energy crisis in Asia, but it's not going to be too long before things start shutting down. It's going to have profound effect on the global economy. Profound. I've read places that said we're already got a 3-month recession locked in, and it could possibly be now 6. This so the so there was also last week questions that the ceasefire was going to hold given Israel's bombing of Lebanon. There's now talks going on between Israel and Lebanon, the Lebanese government, about Hezbollah and Iran as well. It's and it was kind of funny because Trump said that Israel would not be bombing Lebanon, and then promptly bombed Lebanon. Not long after the tweet got out, the president said the USA will get all nuclear dust created by our great B-2 bombers. No money will exchange hands in any way, shape, or form. This deal is in no way subject to Lebanon either, but the USA will separately work with Lebanon and deal with the Hezbollah situation in an appropriate manner. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough. And the post is quite poignant when it says Israel has effectively told Trump to screw himself by bombing Lebanon immediately after he said they were prohibited from doing so. We're going to learn a lot about the power dynamic between Trump and Netanyahu in the coming days. And yeah, it seems like Israel is still doing whatever the hell they want to. And this was from last week. The bombing has now stopped. There's a ceasefire negotiation happening with all of this, but this all was going along last week and is just keeping the war going in every single way. And like I said, now it's the Gulf, it's Iran, it's now Lebanon and Israel. It's everywhere in the region. It's region wide now, and that is going to have a lot of consequences. Now, when it comes to what one could argue is the war in Iran for Israel, public opinion of Israel in the United States, especially anyone under 50, has basically collapsed. I'm not quite sure if it was yet another Middle East war, the talk of bringing back the draft, all the talk of national service, whatever have you, but public opinion has collapsed. We'll let a nice man from I Think This Is MS Now tell you all about it.
They have very much shifted away from Israel. Look at this. Net favorability of Israel among men under the age of 50.
This is from the
In
Tennessee
2022, not too bad, but not too hot to trot either at -3 points. By 2025, again, down we go, -22 points. That is a 19-point shift in just 3 years' time. But it gets even worse. Look at this for Israel. -47 points. That's a 44-point shift away from Israel on the net favorability amongst young men who, of course, shifted massively into the Republican column back in 2024, and they have been shifting away from Israel over the last 4 years. They have very much shifted away from Israel. Look at this.
Thank you, Tennessee Holler. Yeah, so as I was telling someone, Israel had better get absolutely everything they want. They will never be able to drag the U.S. into a war like this ever again. I mean, the price of this for them is everything, simply because they have lost any meaningful confidence in the American people under 50. And that's a very important age bracket because the boomers are dying. You know, the boomers are on the way out. The people under 50 are now a very large voting bloc. And if Israel thinks this is going to continue much after the midterm elections, much less after 2028, they're delusional. This is catastrophic. Nobody from either party is going to be able to do the pro-Israel thing with these opinion polling numbers. And my advice to the Republican Party is, if you want to continue to win a White House every several years, your dogged and religiously based support of Israel is a loser. Almost in a majority. That's quite frightening. Now, obviously, people are not going to single issue voter that, so they can probably get away with it. But I would say that's a bigger liability than not. Remember, Trump and Vance are supposed to be the anti-war ticket for peace, and that has not been the situation. This war shows no end in sight. Again, it's a long way away. It's a long road to 2028. It's even a long road to the midterms. It's only April. This is frightening. So thank you, Tennessee Holler, for doing this analysis. I got a few minutes left. What do we want to talk? Oh, let's talk about the warehouse fires. Let's talk warehouse fires. We can skip the ballroom. The ballroom is also a bunker. You know. That's that story. The ballroom is a bunker. The White House ballroom is a bunker, but we knew that. Says here. So in case you don't know, there has been a rash of warehouse fires nationwide. This is a fire at the Raytheon facility in Georgia, Warner Robins, Georgia. There's been about 29 facility fires, or warehouse fires nationwide. This all kicked off because of the guy who burnt down that Kimberly-Clark warehouse. And I wonder if they have a video of that here handy. I did not do my homework on that, and they post a lot. Well, it's okay. But so that started that, and that slogan of all you had to do was pay us enough to live has become a bit of a touch point, especially on activist leftist spaces and socialist spaces. Power to the People is a socialist channel. I would also say, by way, not that's on the warehouse issue, but a new voice is started to publish at the Cameron Journal. Sarantos Fotopoulos, who is a longtime friend of mine. He and I met in a comment section on Facebook years ago. He writes these lovely essays on Facebook. He is a communist. He writes from a very far left perspective. And his article on the consumer complicity in exploitation of labor in China is coming out tomorrow morning at about 10 o'clock Eastern. So I would definitely give that a read and experience a different point of view on electronics and consumption and how that has built up China and manufacturing and geopolitics. It's all threaded together very neatly, very accessible, very easy to read. Check that out tomorrow. But yeah, there has been a rash of people just setting places on fire. Now, when I first heard about this, my thought was foreign actor sabotage. But But I don't think that's what this is. I think it is people just have had enough. Is it the stagnant wages? Is it everything up? It is probably all of the, check all the above. Rising healthcare costs, rising house costs. Your basic McJob doesn't pay a decent life anymore. It just doesn't. And that is an absolutely massive problem that people are only going to tolerate for so long. And then eventually, you know, they're gonna lash out. They're gonna break out. So it's a quite frightening thing, but there are different facilities have just lit on fire all over the country. They're not easily finding who it was. Obviously, at the Kimberly-Clark warehouse, the guy live streamed it, so they caught him quite quickly. But I wrote a long thing about this in the newsletter on Saturday. Long story short, to say, you can only screw people over for so long before they will just start lighting the machines on fire. And we've been here before, actually. There was a great video from a creator called Yon Sides, who normally does gaming content, and he was talking about the history of labor. And now I'm very aware of that because a lot of the early labor movement in the country started in mines out west. Ludlow Massacre, things like that. I should do a podcast episode about that at some point. A nice long produced one where I say a lot of interesting historical things. So always very conscious of that. And I mean, people forget the labor movement was bought with the weekend, the 8-hour workday was bought with blood. People died. Real deaths at the hands of National Guard, military, Pinkertons, all this type of thing in order to secure rights for themselves and their families. That's, you know, that's in West Virginia. It's out west. All these places, you did not get to the current labor conditions without death. And now we have warehouse fires because we're living in an age where capital, assets, and all the money are flowing to the top, and it's not even passing through other people's pockets first. And this is the result. And so, the Post, where it says, what we're seeing now is the result of the U.S. regime successfully suppressing organized resistance. Widespread and growing lone wolf action supported ideologically by the lionization of its perpetrators. The fastest way to be a hero is to set something important on fire. And I dare say, you know, this is definitely the case. Now, this does not rule out foreign sabotage, and I'm kind of surprised that no one's ever kind of brought that up. I'm kind of like, how do we know it's not foreign actors doing this? But given it all, you know, there's not an indication of that yet, so watch the space for that. But here's the thing that's funny. This is not being covered by mainstream media, by the way. This is not anywhere. It's all online. It's on TikTok. It's on socialist accounts. All this type of thing. You will not find this in the New York Times or Washington Post. Nothing. No one's really covering this. But it is happening more and more throughout the country. And even if it's not people here, even if it is foreign interference, this should be a huge story. These aren't just localized incidents. It is happening a lot. I mean, I think all these fires have happened in the last 7 to 10 days. You know, whole country's on fire at that rate. Like, the fact that this isn't being covered more, I think, is very interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the investigation as it comes out. But the way certain groups and certain ideologies have gotten into this tells me I think people have had it. And I think people have had it. You can only screw people over for so long before things start to burn. Oh, this is the Tulsi Gabbard thing. Do we want to cover that? No, we're actually over time. I will say, and this is the Tribunal of Truth thing, which I wrote about in the newsletter. We'll save a couple of these for next week. Tulsi Gabbard has come out with more evidence of a coup against President Trump's election in 2016. Which is funny because the report and everything was partially, the evidence she's using was partly written by the first Trump administration. But in case you're wondering what all is happening with all that, that's still going on. And to give fair time, I will let the video
Multiple intelligence
play.
community assessments released in the months leading up to the November 2016 election concluded that Russia had neither the intent nor capability to impact the outcome of the U.S. election.
which we know is not
On
true.
December 5th.
We've been listening there to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, continuing on what has now been a multi-day effort, not only with public statements like this, but release of documents, to attempt to back up the quite extreme allegation that President Obama is guilty of treason and that he worked in some sort of conspiracy with Hillary Clinton, etc. in the assessment.
No, and this is the yeah, and this takedown is absolutely perfect. The report Gabbard declassified that was written by Devin Nunes's staff in 2020. It disputed one finding of the 2017 intelligence assessment that Putin preferred Trump, arguing the judgment relied on a single source that didn't meet analytical standards. The report found the rest of the 2017 assessment sound. Trump's own special counsel, John Durham, spent 3 years investigating whether Obama officials fabricated the Russian intelligence. He filed no charges. He found no criminal conspiracy. His mandate was exactly what this post alleges happened. He came up empty. Gabbard calling something a years-long coup does not make it one. The documents she released have been reviewed by independent analysts at lawfare and factcheck.org and found not to support the fabrication claim. This report is a partisan dispute over analytical methodology, not proof of government overthrow. CNN cutting away from a briefing is a programming decision. The underlying claim in the briefing has a documented evidentiary problem that predates the broadcast. True. Because the guy called it a co-conspirator network that conspired hand in hand with the Obama administration. Here's the thing, though. It didn't work. And also, we know about the Russia thing because of Cambridge Analytica. I've said this over and over. I don't know why I keep talking about it. I should just quit programming it over and over and over. We know about the Russia thing because of Cambridge Analytica. That's how we know that Russia was up to no good. We have seen evidence of the accounts they had on both sides, the Facebook groups they created, the influence campaign the FSB was in charge of, and the guy who was running social media for the Trump campaign was working directly with Cambridge Analytica and employees from Facebook on this. They knew what was happening. They knew what was going on. So I fail to understand why she keeps bringing this up, other than she's trying to seem like the good person to Trump because he's kind of frozen her out lately. She has not been really involved in any of the Iran war stuff. And so, yeah, it's not the single most damning evidence in U.S. history. The Obama administration definitely investigated the Trump campaign. That they did do. They definitely also looked at Russian connections to the Trump campaign, and people went to jail for that for good reason, because they were unregistered foreign agents. Ask Roger Stone and Paul Manafort about that. Any political campaign with too many ties to a foreign government is deeply concerning. That goes with Biden, China too. It is definitely deeply concerning. But to try to all this serves to do is to hold up Trump's stolen election narrative. Or because it's the coup in 2016 didn't work, so they stole it from me in 2020, but I finally won in 24. Well, if the Democrats are really trying to screw Trump over on that, they couldn't rig an election twice? If it's that elaborate? I mean, common sense, a lot of this stuff starts to begin to break down, and it gets so frustrating that we can't apply common sense here. But anyway, that's it. That's it for me. I'm over time. We'll talk about California's minimum wage, and they're providing sex changes for illegal immigrants later. This is their Tribunal of Truth thing I wrote about on the newsletter, so we'll circle back on the rest of that stuff. Next week. I want to remind everyone one more time that Cameron Journal Salons is coming on May 7th. Salons.cameronjournal.com is the place to go check that out. There'll be invites going out over email to people here very soon. I actually got to work on that tonight after this. I'm going to go take a shower first, though. But that's all that's happening. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter, CameronJournal.substack.com or CameronJournal.com/newsletter. Sign up for that. Follow me on socials. I post long social threads all the time, and that's exclusive content that you won't see anywhere else. And my buddy Sarantos has his article coming out tomorrow morning. So, I'll see everybody back here Wednesday for The Living Joke. Looking forward to that with Connor and Will. And otherwise, I'll see you next Monday for the Cameron Journal Newshour. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. And remember, the world is hard. This is not.